Thank you so much. So my favorite day of the year, no competition, is Easter Sunday. I get so excited that I can't sleep the night before. And yeah, I'm 46 years old, but I still expect an Easter basket, carefully chosen, right? It started when I was in college. I went to George Washington University, which is in Washington, D.C., and the majority of the students there are really affluent. It's a real rich kids' college. But I was there on scholarship. I spent more time in the bursar's office than I did in the library. So on my sophomore year, when my boyfriend Jean-Paul at the time suggested we move off campus and save thousands of dollars, I was all over that. We chose an apartment, and at the time, I noticed that it was incredibly far away from campus. But I also noticed that it seemed really charming. There were little kids playing double dutch on the sidewalk and old men sitting on the stoops. And, we both were from the country, and to us, it seemed like this quintessential urban neighborhood, and we were so excited to be a part of it. When we moved in, shortly thereafter, we realized that the building across the street, a really narrow street, was actually a crack house. And this was the late 80s, early 90s, like the height of the crack epidemic in the United States, and Washington, D.C. was like right in the middle of it. So much so that Thanksgiving, I went home to visit my mom, and I happened to read this Time magazine article where they were talking about the crack epidemic, and they said the street corner that saw more drug deals than any other street corner in the country was 12th and O in Washington, D.C., my street corner. And I was even like, hey, Mom, I live here. And she just had that vacant, mild stare that she always did whenever I told her anything about my life. It was a really serious neighborhood. At first, the beautiful parts of it with the kids and the old man and the terrible parts of it, they could kind of live side by side. But as the crack epidemic escalated and the gun violence increased, there were fewer to no children playing on the streets, and there were no old men sitting on the stoops anymore, and all that was left were the drug dealers and the drug addicts. When I say that there was gun violence, I mean every single night we woke up to gunshots. We had a basement apartment, and our bedroom window looked right onto the sidewalk. And one night I heard gunshots that were pretty close, and I looked out the window to see a dead man right there. And the gun violence was bad, but what made it so hard to live there were the drug addicts themselves. I don't know how many of you have seen a crack addict, but there's something about the drug that makes your eyes swell or something. Like you see the whites of their eyes, and they would walk around in the stupor, and you could just think they look like zombies. And as the crack epidemic increased, there were more and more zombies on the streets, and it got to the point I would just put on my backpack in the morning to go to class, and I'd have to step over bodies that were just too high to even get up off the sidewalk. It was so hard and dark. And there was an alley behind our apartment, and that's where the people went who couldn't even afford the drugs at the crack house. And the sounds I heard coming out of that alley, I can still hear. I used to walk by the entrance to the alley to get to my apartment, and I always imagined the alley like this big tongue just unfurled, and I just put my toe on it, and it would just swallow me whole. Jean-Paul and I started walking around like zombies ourselves because it was so devastating, and we were so unprepared, two white college kids who didn't have any idea what we were getting ourselves into. One morning, we decided to have our coffee outside. It looked like a sunny day. Jean-Paul was ahead of me, and he opened the door, and he just stopped, and I actually bumped right into him. And I was filled with panic because I couldn't imagine what he could see that we haven't already seen that would stop him so abruptly. But he stepped to the side, and I looked out on the street, and I saw all these women walking down the street, and they were dressed in purples and yellows, and they were wearing hats, and they were walking with their children, and they were laughing throaty laughs, and their kids were dancing around them, and there were fathers and mothers and children, and they took over the street. They were walking all over it. And for the first time, there was light and joy and happiness. And Jean-Paul stood there, and he looked at me, and he said, "What's happening?" And it took me a second, and I thought, I think it's Easter Sunday. And I was shocked by the transformation of this neighborhood into this place of joy and song and family. And I thought to myself, my God, what a powerful day. And it was just that one day, but for that whole day, there were no gunshots, no zombies, just laughter and joy and family. So every year, the night before Easter, I think of all the hard and dark places in the world, and I think to myself that the next day, some of them, not all, but some, will enjoy one day of light and joy. And every year, I celebrate it with them. Thank you.